And joining me now is President Trump's Chief of Staff, Reince Priebus. Mr. Priebus, welcome back to Meet the Press, sir.
Good morning, Chuck.
Let me start with the issue of Mike Flynn and the conversations, what was said or not said with the Russian ambassador. You were on this program just before the inauguration, and here's what you told viewers at the time.
I have talked to General Flynn. None of that came up. The subject matter of sanctions or the actions taken by the Obama administration did not come up in the conversation. And
so there was no challenge of American policy currently by Mr. Flynn with the Russian ambassador. Obviously, now we know that was not true. You clearly were misled. Walk me through this. When did you know you had been misled?
Sometime after January 27th, it was our legal counsel got a heads up from Sally Yates that something wasn't adding up with his story, and so then our legal department went into a review of the situation, and sometime after that, when Sally Yates refused to do her job as Attorney General, like 2 days later, we had to get rid of her. And then sometime after that, the legal department came back and said that they didn't see anything wrong with what was actually said, but then we started thinking about whether or not Michael Flynn was being straight with us, and that's when we started asking a lot of questions and sort of deposing Michael Flynn and figuring out what he knew or what he didn't know. He maintained the fact that he never talked to the Russian ambassador about sanctions, but still something wasn't adding up. And eventually, we determined that he did, in fact, talk about the sanctions, even though we didn't believe that it was illegal. The fact was it turned more or less into a conversation about whether or not he was being honest with us and the vice president, and the president asked for his resignation, and we got it.
Did you read those transcripts yourself?
I can't answer that question, but I can assure you that I am fully aware of the situation, and we determined that he wasn't being straight with the vice president and others, and that's why we asked for his resignation.
Why was there more than a week? Why did more than a week go by before the vice president was informed of this issue?
Well, I think he was always aware of the issue as to whether or not he talked about sanctions. I mean, that was an ongoing conversation. He was aware of the fact that the FBI interviewed Michael Flynn. The legal department started reviewing the matter to get a report on whether or not anything was actually done wrong and whether or not he, in fact, talked to the Russian ambassador about sanctions. And some point after we were first tipped off and got to the point of reviewing whether he was being honest or not, after we got the report back from the White House counsel, that's when we looped in, or that's when the vice president was brought into the conversation more fully in regard to whether or not Michael Flynn was honest.
Waiting that long, do you regret that it looks like that the vice president is essentially not in the loop?
No, the vice president's in the loop on everything, Chuck. I mean, it happened so fast. I mean, what happened was the legal department was tipped off. They looked into the legality of it. The actual investigation was ended almost immediately, so there was no investigation. It was a matter of whether it was legal. But then when we found out that, hey, he may have talked to the Russian ambassador, that's when we started having the conversations with the vice president as to whether or not whether he was being honest or not. So, I mean, it felt like it happened very quickly, and we made a determination very quickly.
Do you still believe this was an honest mistake by Mr. Flynn, or do you think are you concerned it's something more nefarious?
No, I don't think he did. My view is, and I'm not an expert on, you know, the Logan Act, but I can just tell you that our legal department looked at it. My view is what he did wasn't illegal, like many other people have said, but it was the fact that he wasn't straight or honest, and I just found it hard to believe that you would have a conversation with the Russian ambassador and not remember it. So either way, either you don't remember or you weren't honest, either way it was an unsustainable place to be, and the president made a decisive decision to ask for his resignation, and he got it. But look, the fact of the matter is, in between all that time, the president got a lot of things done. Keystone, Dakota, we got out of TPP, we nominated Neil Gorsuch. We had the Keystone and Dakota pipeline begin.
Okay.
We had a hiring freeze. We had a deregulation executive order. There were so many things that were also happening to the good, Chuck, that it would be nice to talk about some of the accomplishments, which in 30 days have been remarkable.
I'll give you some time to get to that, but I want to get back to Mr.
Yeah.
Flynn. Is one of the reasons why you ended up having to let him go, when he was interviewed by the FBI on the 24th, before the Sally Yates warning, did he mislead the FBI or lie to the FBI? Is that one of the issues that came up during the deposing?
That's a different issue for the FBI to answer, Chuck. I mean, I'm just not in a position to answer. I certainly have talked about that issue with leadership at the FBI, but I'm not in a position to talk about that with you. But listen, we've talked about this. I think we've laid it out very clearly. And now it's up to the DOJ and the FBI to take it any further if that's what they do.
By the way, since Mr. Flynn, has anybody else inside the White House been interviewed by the FBI over the last couple of months?
Not that I know of, Chuck. I think the answer is no to that. I would know. Okay,
I want to go to the press conference on the issue of Russia. The president never seemed to answer the question that was asked 3 or 4 times there, which is, does he know for sure that anybody on his campaign, can he say definitively that nobody in his campaign, nobody that he's been associated with, had any contacts with any Russian agents?
No, first of all, the answer is no, and we don't know of any contacts with Russian agents, and that gets to that New York Times story, Chuck. I mean, we've spent days talking about a story that says that our campaign had constant contacts with Russian spies, and I can tell you, I've talked to the top levels of the intelligence community, and they've assured me that that New York Times story was grossly overstated and inaccurate and totally wrong. I know what the intelligence committees in the House and the Senate were told by the FBI, and I know what I was told, and what I will tell you is that story was total baloney. And in fact, Devin Nunes, who's the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, went on the record after he was informed by the FBI as to that story, and what did he say? He said it was total garbage. This is what we're talking about, Chuck. It's not all media. It's not everyone involved in the media. It is this sort of fake news stuff that is enormously important. That when you get a front page story of the New York Times without a single source on the record saying that your campaign had constant contacts. They didn't say 1 contact. They didn't say 2 contacts. It doesn't matter. We have not been informed of even that. But to say constant contact, then the next day, Chuck, the Wall Street Journal comes out and says that the President of the United States is being cut out of information by the intelligence community. Then later in the day, all of the main departments of the intelligence community says, that's not true. This is what we're dealing with while we're putting in a lobbying ban, while we're freezing federal government employees, while we're getting the economy back on track. We're sitting here talking about these stories, or whether Steve Bannon and I get along or not, which we do. I can assure you people in Kenosha, Wisconsin aren't worried about that. They want to see jobs and money back in their pocket, and that's what I'm trying to do, and we're trying to do every day, Chuck.
The Associated Press has a story this morning that the Senate Intelligence Committee has sent a letter to the White House counsel asking for a preservation of any communication, anything that could have any ties either right now, since you've taken office, during the transition of the campaign, to make sure all records are preserved regarding Russia. Are you aware of this letter, and have you already acted upon it?
Yeah, I'm aware of it, and I think they're going to do their job, and they have to do that. Those are things that Richard Burr and that team have to do. And that doesn't mean that there's anything there. It just means they need to do some things to satisfy their committee that they've looked into something, and then they can have meetings behind closed doors that they always do in the Intel Committee, and then they'll issue a report. And as long as they do their job and we cooperate with them, they'll issue a report, and the report will say there's nothing there. I know what they were told by the FBI because I've talked to the FBI. I know what they're saying. I wouldn't be on your show right now telling you that we've been assured that there's nothing to the New York Times story if I actually wasn't assured. And by the way, if I didn't actually have clearance to make this comment. I'm not a sloppy guy. I dot my I's and cross my T's. I was a 15-year litigator before I became RNC chairman.
Fair enough. Let me ask you this final question here on the president's tweet. I'll put it up here. The fake news media, failing New York Times, NBC News, ABC, CBS, CNN, is not my enemy. It is the enemy of the American people. And look, I understand there's press criticism all the time. It happens with many presidents. But let me ask it this question this way. Aren't you concerned that now that the President of the United States does not have the moral authority to travel around the world and express the openness for a free press in other countries? A free press is being challenged in a Turkey, in a Russia. With the President of the United States trying to delegitimize the American press, does that not sort of undercut his ability to spread freedom and advocate for press freedoms around the world?
Well, first of all, it's nothing new. Thomas Jefferson, Abraham Lincoln, John Adams have all had their issues with the press. I can assure you this, Chuck, and everyone in your business. The President believes in the First Amendment. He believes in the free press. I believe in those things. We don't believe everyone is lousy in the media. We don't believe everything is bad. But there are some things that are really bad. And we've tried to, he categorizes that as fake news. What we've been through over the last 10 days has been unbelievable. The leaks, the fake stories, the anonymous accusations, that stuff is bad. And that's what he's referring to. I know where he's coming from on this, but I can assure you he believes in the free press, the First Amendment. He loves our Constitution. We just want to get this stuff back on the rails and more honest in regard to these really big accusations that are coming at us.
I know you believe all of this is press generated. Do you not have a problem inside that West Wing with leaks yourself?
Look, if there's a problem there, those people will have big issues. But the truth is that we don't have problems in the West Wing. I mean, you read about all these stories of I don't get along with Bannon, and this one said, actually, we've really gelled as a team, and we get along great, and we're working well together. And the amount of drama and spin that you read about, mostly in the Washington Daily gossip rags, is unbelievable stuff, and it just isn't true. And you read it every day, and you wonder what alternative universe they're reporting on, because it just isn't true. I think every West Wing has different personalities. You had Rahm Emanuel, Valerie Jarrett, David Axelrod, you had Andy Card, Karl Rove. You always have different kinds of people. But it doesn't mean that you don't ultimately get along, serve the president, and want to make the American people proud. That's what we're doing every day. That's what we're trying to do every day.
All right, Reince Priebus, I'm going to leave it there. All right. I guess thanks for coming behind enemy lines, and we'll see you next time.
No, I'm happy to be here. Thank you, Chuck.
Thank you, Mr. Priebus. Hey, NBC News fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here, and then click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.